Hi everyone and welcome to this week's Insight. I'm really delighted to say that this morning I'm going to be joined by Peter Cattermole, who's an engineer volunteer and the chair of the board of trustees at Remap. Now he's going to be talking about adapting everyday tasks and of course prosthetic aids. And then we'll be taking your questions with the chat below. But in the meantime, good morning Peter, and over to you.
Good morning, Alastair. Good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invite. We have two guests, two ladies who you can probably see on the screen, but I'll introduce them later. Let me tell you a little bit about Remap, and there's the first slide, and what we are. Remap is a charity you may have heard of. It helps disabled people of all ages, and the idea is to live more independent lives, and that's what we're all about. That's what we focus all of our efforts on. And we have a network of skilled volunteer designers and makers and engineers who make equipment either from scratch or sometimes modified for people, and it's all free of charge. One of the things you will notice on these slides is some photographs that appear. These are little pictures of illustrating some of our previous projects. The picture here on this one is Sarah, who was in a wheelchair, and she wanted to be able to get Dexter, her baby, in and out of the cot, but couldn't do it because she couldn't get close enough with the wheelchair, and she couldn't reach over the cot like a normal cot is designed to do. So this one was modified in order to allow her to do just that. So our values. We treat everybody as an individual, which is quite important to our philosophy. We don't start with things that are on the market. If there's something on the market already, then we advise people to go and buy that thing. What we do is we take individual problems or individual challenges and desires, and we try and convert that into a practical solution. And our aim is to try and make sure that the people we're helping can meet their aspirations. And it's important to say that no one is excluded on cost. We'll talk a bit about donations later, but we make sure that at the point of delivery, everything is free. The little picture here, this one often gets an R from people because it's got a dog in it, Ted the dog. Wendy wanted to take Ted wherever she went, but she couldn't manage it on her scooter to move around. So one of our engineers designed a sort of chariot for Ted, which went down very well. So what's our approach? We provide solutions to everyday problems. We'll talk about some of the more sophisticated solutions in a moment, but it's really when nothing is commercially available. We custom design equipment for the individuals because everybody's needs are different. Very rarely do we get a request that says, can I have another one of those things? We almost certainly are going to have to modify or adjust the design in order to come up with the thing that will meet the person's needs. And this little picture on the right-hand side is Becky. She's a quadriplegic. She really, the only thing that she could do was to smile. And you can just about see in the photograph a small switch, micro switch, connected on her left cheek. And that was used as a switch to be able to page turn on a reader, an e-reader, which allowed her to actually control her reading rather than having to have a full-time carer turn the pages for her. So a very simple device, but it worked really well. So how does it being here, Remap, how do we work? We typically get referrals from occupational therapists, but sometimes it's straight from the individual. Sometimes it's from a referral from another charity that says, we can't help this person, but maybe you can. Our volunteer contacts the person or the OT, and with the OT, if there's one appointed, we assess the project and look at what we think the solution might be and take the medical advice as to what we can and can't do. Develop a solution, create a prototype, sometimes several prototypes, and we'll come on to that later on when we talk to the ladies on the screen. And we'll keep on going basically until we come up with something which is fit for purpose. What I want to do very briefly is to introduce you to some people who we've helped in a little bit more detail than we've done so far, just to illustrate the fact that we try and help people in every single walk of life. So you'll see here an example we'll talk about at home, in business, school, doing sports, the simple solutions to simple problems, complex solutions. We'll talk about helping some of our older clients, and we'll also refer to something we've done for one of our younger clients, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But basically, we will help people with any and all disabilities, and sometimes multiple. So this is Michelle, and she was a sewer. She had a complicated sewing machine. Somebody might recognise this. It's called an overlocker. Doesn't mean anything to me, but what it does mean is that these things come with foot pedals, and she was in a wheelchair, and there was no way she could operate her sewing machine with a foot pedal. So the engineer, by a bit of ingenuity, created a separate control box with safety features built in that she could use with her hands, so she could get back to doing exactly what she wanted to do. So there's an example of in the home. This lady, Sarah, had a problem. She has cerebral palsy, and she had a posture problem. And what she was finding was she was leaning heavily on her left arm, and this was causing all sorts of posture problems, back problems, and it was causing her to not be able to work, not be able to do things normally around the house. And one of our engineers came up with a clever little device. The bottom right-hand picture hopefully illustrates a little bit of the electronics hidden in that sleeve that she's wearing. And what it does is, quite simply, if she leans for too long on her left side, which is the wrong thing for her posture, an alarm goes off, and it makes her sit up straight. And she's found it incredibly useful. And in fact, she's now back at work and running her own business. This one, I have to say, is particularly personal because it was one of my projects. Lucy, 9-year-old girl, a little bit older now, she's 10 now, again, cerebral palsy. She attends a mainstream school, and she wants to be able to engage with the class in a way that her friends in the class did, which was, to put their hands up to say, "Miss, I want to answer the question," but she couldn't do that. So the challenge was to come up with something which would allow her to attract the attention of the teacher. She wanted to be in control, not have a carer do it for her, but also not to disturb the rest of the class. And the sort of disassembled pink thing on the right-hand side is what we came up with, which is a light on the end of a stick with a head button that operates it. And what happens is you can see in the picture on the left-hand side, she can hit it with her left or nudge it with her head on the wireless button. That will set off the light. The light will go on for a few seconds, 30 seconds. The teacher recognizes she's got the answer and goes over to Lucy. It worked so well that, first of all, the teacher loved it, Lucy loved it, and during lockdown, of course, she took it home and she was driving her mum crackers because she kept on saying, "Look at me, look at me." So that was one that is definitely in the school environment, but actually transitioned to home. This is an example of a project which is slightly different. I made this big deal about the fact that everybody's different and we meet individual needs, but this one was for a sports club for children with disabilities, where they wanted to try out new sports. And the new sport, this one, as you can see, was archery. And yet many of the kids at the club had many different disabilities and all had different needs, but they wanted to be able to have something which was lightweight, they could take around, go to competitions and use, and all of the kids could actually use and fire a real bow, not a toy one. And so the engineer came up with a device for mounting the bow, clamping it. It can be loaded by a helper, and then the child who's competing in archery can then release the arrow himself, him or herself. That was quite a nice one, and it was unusual. I mentioned about relatively simple solutions. Quite often ramps can be installed and are provided by local authorities, but this one was a particular need. It was custom made because Kane, who was the client, had an accident 4 years ago. He was basically in a wheelchair with 24-hour help and support in a hospital, but his parents wanted him to come home for Christmas. so they rented a house close by to the hospital he was in, with the expectation they could actually bring him out just for 4 hours to to celebrate Christmas. What they didn't realise until after they'd rented the house was that they couldn't get the wheelchair through the hall to get to the main part of the house where they were going to celebrate Christmas. Of course, the house was only rented for a few days, so we had to design a ramp which was collapsible, lightweight, short, but still possible to get over this obstruction in the hallway. And this was another one of mine, as it happens. And on Christmas Eve, I was laying on the floor installing the ramp, and the family were climbing over the top of me with Christmas trees, presents, turkeys, and the rest of celebration for Christmas. And then Kane turned up an hour and a half later. So that was relatively simple, but a bit of an interesting little tweak. I mentioned that was a fairly simple one. This was probably one of the more complex ones that we've tackled. Ian was an avid football fan, but he had extremely poor eyesight. He would go to the matches very, very keen, but he couldn't really see what was going on. He was just soaking up the atmosphere. And then he would go home and he'd watch it on the replay. But this word is often overused, but literally he was about 6 inches away from the screen at home, so he could see some movement of what was happening with the players. What Rupert, one of our engineers, did was to come up with this sort of cyborg attachment that Ian's got on here. It's a helmet with a very high definition camera mounted on the top, a virtual reality screen mounted on the front, and a controller which he has in his hand on the wheelchair. And with this, he could go to the matches, he could zoom in on the action, he could freeze frame, he could change contrast, he could do all sorts of things, actually watch the action live at the football match, which just transformed his life. It's complex, and in fact, Rupert told me only the other day that he's still working. He's on to Mark III now, but he's still working on upgrades and developments to make it more compact and simpler. Okay, we've tackled a number of different environments. This is a project that was done relatively simple for a chap, Ellen, elderly gentleman who used a 3-wheel rollator to get around. He liked to go on country walks, but as you can see, he's got part of his right arm missing, and it wasn't safe. He couldn't push the rollator. He couldn't use the brakes to stop it. So we converted the walker with an attachment for him, both for his stump and also to control the brakes on both wheels with one hand. And there's a lovely video, which I can't show you today, of him toddling off down the country road in Ireland with his rollator, happy as a sandboy. So that worked really well. Now, Andrea, Laura, oops, sorry. This is where I would normally go to Ethan's pen holder. But I have to say, we're really privileged today. We have Andrea, who is Ethan's occupational therapist, and Laura, his mum, and even more importantly, Ethan himself, who you can probably, I hope you can see. Oh, okay, well, we just changed the view. So we can see see Ethan. So what we were going to do was to introduce a real live project and see how that works. Andrea, can you remember when you contacted Remap and what your thoughts were at the time?
Well, Remap is obviously a company that I've been aware of for a long time in my career as an occupational therapist, and I've used them previously. And then when working with Ethan, there wasn't really anything on the market that was meeting his needs. So I contacted Remap to see whether you guys could come on board and help. And I must say it was a very quick process between putting the referral in to actually making contact with you as well. So it's a really good, quick process, and it's really good to work together to kind of problem solve and come up with a solution.
It didn't seem that quick at the time, but I'm pleased you said that.
Well, from first contact, it was quick. The end result took a little bit longer.
Can you tell us what you wanted us to do for Ethan?
So Ethan's got a condition called osteoglycosis, and at present it means that his his wrists are in a neutral position. So in order for him to grasp and hold things, normal conventional tools aren't very easy for him to use. Had a look to see if there was anything out there that would be suitable, and there wasn't anything. So I approached you to see whether I could come up with a solution or something to enable him to be able to start to do some mark making and to hold a pen, basically. So initially we had a virtual Zoom call, didn't we, with Ethan and Laura and yourself, to kind of look at where he was at the moment, how he was holding crayons, etc., and then take it from there, really.
Laura, can I interrupt you? I can see you're working hard there, but can I interrupt you? Can you tell us a little bit about our first attempts at trying to help Ethan?
So the first attempt was like a little cylinder that would hold a pen inside with a Velcro around the outside. But we had problems because Ethan's hand is twisted. Wants to talk to everyone. Ethan's hand is twisted, sliding out, or it wouldn't quite stay because of his limited grip. So that's how we started.
And I can't remember how many versions we went through, but what were your thoughts as we tried and tried and tried again?
We had quite a few different tries. Sorry. We had quite a few different tries. And it was difficult because it was lockdown. That made it obviously very difficult because you couldn't quite see exactly how Ethan was working with his hands or the shape that was happening, the movement that was happening, so that made it difficult. And I think a little part of me was a little bit nervous because everything can be a bit tricky when we're trying to find things for Ethan. So I was a little bit nervous that we wouldn't find something or make something work. But what I was amazed at was the perseverance. I think you had a number of Zoom calls and you just kept going with trying to find something that would work. He's desperate to show you. We're doing stickers at the moment.
Just for the people watching and listening, what we eventually came up with was a device. Have you had that? Oh, you got the brown one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
this
the
came up.
idea of this was that the angle of the pen holder had to be at a particular angle to get it right for his grip. And I remember that sound so well. And then the inverted mushroom that we came up with was designed to make sure that the pen stayed in contact with the paper, no matter whether you were going left to right or right to left, which we know that Ethan likes to do. Go on, have a go.
Sorry, he absolutely loves this now, and it's just lovely to see. So, Ethan, what colour would you like to colour? Everything's blue, but that's fine. Would you like to?
It's my favourite colour as well, Ethan. Don't worry.
I see you colouring. Look, good colouring. Keep going. Go on, a bit more. Look at you watching. Trying to get It's blue, isn't it, darling? Well done. You go ready, steady, go. Can you go fast? Normally you go really fast, don't you?
He knows he's on camera.
Yeah, he's gone camera shy. Go fast.
Andrea, sorry. Have you actually seen anything like this before? Have you come across it?
No, I mean, we had a little look on the internet, but the things didn't get the angle right to go back and forth, only could go in one direction. So this is something that I hadn't seen before, and I can see Ethan using it now, but I have seen him scribble really, really quickly with it as well, and it doesn't cause any difficulty at all. So it's fantastic.
And Laura, just finally, what was it like when Ethan started to use it?
Do you know, it just is amazing, and it means so much when you find something that enables him to access the same as another person might so easily. So something that's so easy for another child, it's blue, something that's so easy for another child, this enabled him. Do you want another colour? enabled him to be able to do that and to be able to do something the same as somebody else might just do without even thinking about it. So it just meant so much, and it's so lovely being able to sit down with him and do things like this, because do the tree now. I'll show you, because we couldn't do it before. Here's a picture, see, and see him sort of scribbling and having a go. Actually, I think doing the same as another child of his age might do is really special.
Yeah, and Laura, and particularly Ethan, thank you so much for coming along today and talking to us. James, can I go back to the slide? Okay, going back to PowerPoint again. So a question that some people ask is, well, where does the money go when people do donate to us? We've got 900 volunteers across over 60 different branches across the country. And in fact, breaking news, we are just about to rejoin with our Scottish cousins who broke away 30 years ago to become a charity of the Four Nations. And we will have over 1,000 volunteers and over 70 branches around the country. And that'll be in April this year. We typically do in excess of 3,700 projects. I'm sure that this year with the pandemic we will be down, but we'll get back up there and we'll grow even better, I'm sure. All of our funding comes from donations, and the simple answer is that whatever we can gain in terms of donations, we can put to good use, and we can do more projects for more people. So finally, just as a sort of a note which is relevant to the situation that we're all in at the moment, we genuinely believe that Remap is an essential charity providing essential services. So every project we do, we're actually helping people. And in particular, when people are in a position where they're locked down and taken away from their families, we think we can help not just with physical help, but also with mental help as well. We believe that supporting those who without it would remain dependent on other people, deprived, isolated, and long after COVID is over, they'd still be having to do things in a very difficult way. So we genuinely think we can help people. And to that end, the final message I really wanted to give was is if there's anybody out there that wants to get help, then you can contact us very easily. The best way to do it is go onto the website remap.org.uk, and then you can just click on the Get Help button. Likewise, if anybody feels motivated to want to volunteer for us, and we take people with all sorts of skills, both engineers and makers, designers, but also people who can do administration, people who can fundraise, people who can be secretaries of the local branches. We will find a job for absolutely everybody. They can go onto that remap.org.uk and just click on the volunteer button. And likewise, if you want to, if you feel motivated to donate, surprise, surprise, there is a donate button on the same website. So you can get everything from there. So thanks for listening. I really appreciate the time. Alastair, I think we're going back to you for some questions and answers. Is that right?
Yep. Thank you so much indeed, Peter. That was great. And of course, Laura and Ethan and Andrea as well for your input. It was great to see your work in action there as well. We've already, and look at that, what a great painting. Fantastic. Beautiful. Wonderful. And as you said, Laura, a predominance of blue there, but that's good. That's good. We like that. We've already had some really positive feedback as well. Lovely words from John Snow and Lou Jones coming in. And what we really want to do now is to open up the questions and chat and things like that to everybody watching. I know we've got a lot of people watching, and I know they'll have lots of questions. And we really appreciate all the work you're doing. I mean, when you look at the sheer scale of what you do, and what to me is the most striking thing is the way that you individualize everything, that it's tailor-made to individuals, because as we know at Reach, everybody has a very slightly different situation to another person. So therefore, having that ability to take away the generic prosthetic, but actually have something that's going to adapt and work is absolutely brilliant. So to everybody watching, please put your questions in the chat below. We would love to pass them on to Peter and everybody else as well. But in the meantime, Peter, what I'd like to ask you is
Sure.
given all these projects coming in, you mentioned that you hear mostly through occupational therapists and you get referred, but can people get a hold of you just direct?
Yes, absolutely. If you go to our website, then you'll find that button that will take you through to a form to can be filled out. Just give us some basic information, and one of our office staff will make contact, get that request to the local branch which is closest to you. One of the beauties of the design of the charity is because we are across all the country, all 4 nations soon. There'll be a branch which is somewhere close to you, and so somebody can come and visit they are allowed to, even within the COVID restrictions, as a charity that's providing essential charity services. Or we can try and do things remotely, or we can try and do things through the occupational therapist. But we can get to you. It's quite good if you've got an occupational therapist assigned, because they can give some medical advice. But if it's something simple, and we stick to our policy of do no harm, then we'll do it for you.
Brilliant. We've already got questions coming in, so this is absolutely great. We've had a question from Catherine, who said, what's the most popular design that you're asked about?
Catherine, you weren't listening. I said everything's different. No, that's a flippant answer. Sorry. We don't get many repeats. I think the one that's probably sparked most interest in the recent times was one of our branches had a little boy who wanted to be able to paddle in the seaside in the sea with his siblings, but the only way he could walk was with a rollator, a wheeled walker, and of course the normal wheels for those walkers are very narrow and they just sink into the wet sand and they're hopeless in the water. So one of our panels came up with the idea of fitting sort of balloon type wheels, sort of this sort of size, sort of thing you might see on, say, a golf trolley, to a rollator. It took quite a bit of modification. And then there's a lovely video on our website and our YouTube channel of him going into the water with this device. And that sparked quite a bit of interest. And we've had, I would say, probably half a dozen requests for, can I have one a bit like that? But, and there's always a but, there's always something a little bit different.
We've had a question from Lou Jones asking about getting involved with Remap, and you mentioned already about going onto the website and having a look and so on. But with that, you talked about having help from people obviously donating, which is great, and with maybe engineering skills, perhaps with administrative skills. Is there anything else that people can help you with? I'm just thinking particularly with our Reach family, who obviously all have children with upper limb differences. Is there anything that they can help with in terms of your research, in terms of any sort of project planning and things like that?
As I mentioned, we will find a job for every volunteer. If somebody wants to help us, we will find a job for them to do, and a meaningful job. We've had people who maybe are volunteers who used to be makers, who are now maybe getting a bit old and want to retire from going out and doing jobs, but they will act as a case officer, and they will sort of sort through the projects coming in and assign them to engineers. We've got people who want to do fundraising. We've got people who have helped us in the office. We've got one volunteer who is actually an accountant, volunteered for a local panel. He's just been adopted onto the board of trustees as our future treasurer, sort of treasurer in waiting. So no, I don't think there's anybody out there who couldn't help us in some way, and the panels are very open and welcoming to bring new people in.
And a question for you, Andrea, if that's okay. Don't worry, I'm not putting you too much on the spot. But it's questions coming about how you found out about Remap, because again, for all occupational therapists and medical professionals, just as Reach get lots of referrals from different people, the big challenge is always getting our name out to everybody so people are aware that Reach is actually there. So how did you find out about Remap, and how do you help maybe other occupational therapists to make sure they know that this exists?
I think I heard about Remap probably about 20 years ago, and I was working with adults with learning disabilities, and there was a local group where they had their monthly meeting, and Remap at the time and you probably still are, were willing for other health professionals to attend their meetings, you know, to find out a bit more about their organisation. So I went along to one of them. That's how I found out about them initially. So they've always been, you know, an organisation in the back of my mind that I've been aware of. And any OTs that I work with, I always tell them about Remap and say, you know, don't forget Remap out there, and why don't you use them if they're coming up with a situation where they need something bespoke for an individual that they're working with.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrea. I really appreciate that. And actually, you know, one of the things that amazes me, Peter, is the broad gamut of skills and abilities and what you do to look after such a broad range of individual needs. A question has come in about age. Is there any restriction on the youngest all the way to the oldest kind of individual that you might be able to help?
Well, you saw Ellen, who was certainly in his senior years, and but I also had a client who was probably about his age, but was actually terminal, and we were helping him really in his last months for a few projects, including some modifications to a wheelchair and a few other things. The youngest that I know of, and I think I probably hold the record here in Remap, was actually a baby that hadn't yet been born. I know.
That's pretty impressive. That's impressive.
There was a couple who'd had the news that their baby was going to be born with dwarfism, and there was a particular need to be able to support the baby's head, neck, and spine in the very early days. And normally that would be done by putting a child into a sort of flat-bottomed pram, but they lived in the country. There was no way they could wheel a pram out even outside their front door. So they had advice from their medical professional that if somebody could invent a device that would hold the baby's head, neck, and back flat and straight, they could use a carrier. So that's what we did.
Brilliant. And one of the things that I know that people watching will be really interested in is the type of things that you've done and created for anybody with upper limb differences, particularly children. We've obviously seen Ethan there, and drawing away, looks so happy there, being very creative in everything that he's doing. But what are some of the other stories within maybe the Reach family or children with upper limb differences that you've been able to help with?
Well, I have to say that Reach is a new one on me. Probably shouldn't be, and I apologise for that. But I'm hoping that this will help us get closer together as two organisations, which is why we're doing this whole thing anyway. I deliberately did not go back and try and research projects which would naturally fall into sort of fairly and squarely right into your bailiwick. But what I can say is we have got a separate website, which I haven't pushed yet, but I will do now, called makeability.org.uk. Makeability, all one word, Makeabilty. And that's a repository of our projects, which we have done. There's 1,500 projects on there that we've done over the years and across the country. And anybody can get into that and take a look at the project. So if you're interested in some particular aspect, some particular issue that you've got, have a look on there. But what I would really recommend is actually, if you've got something that you're not sure how to solve, but you've got an issue that you'd like to try and solve, just come and talk to us and we'll find somebody that can solve it for you.
That's a really, really good resource to have, because, you know, everyone, you know, quite understandably is thinking that their situation is completely unique. And to see something else maybe online, another project that you've done that isn't a million miles away from what they're looking at, it just gives them that inspiration and hope that they know that something can be done for their child or their loved one as well. And obviously, yes, it's great that you found Reach and that we can continue this conversation so that we can work together. And this is obviously the way that community works as well. And I'd just like to encourage people, please put in any of your questions that you've got for Peter at Remap, or for that matter, maybe for Laura. We haven't really put Laura on the spot yet too much. I know you did. You asked a few questions there, Peter. But maybe actually, Laura, you know, tell us a little bit more about your experience in terms of Remap, but also in terms of Reach, and where this was a little bit different for you, the fact that you were able to get Remap to do something tailor-made for Ethan.
We've got quite a noisy boy here, so you might have to listen carefully. I'm not quite sure what more. I'm sorry. He wants the ball. This is what ball and blue are very close together. I'm not sure quite what else to say. I mean, what I'm hopeful for is that I think my experience with Ethan so far is that there's lots of things. Sorry, lots of things.
That's okay. You carry on.
Really,
everyone's been through exactly the same, so don't worry. You carry on.
I can't get the ball. He wants the ball. Lots of things out there that are made for everybody are just not quite there for Ethan. So I think for us, just knowing that Remap are there and that there are charities like Reach there as well to support all those differences that we have in our family. That's just really, really, really helpful for us. Now we've got the ball.
That looks fantastic. One just quick follow-up question there, though, Laura. What would you say? Because for especially, yeah, we can hear you. That's fine. We will struggle through. But I just wanted to ask this final question, if I may, is for families, especially new Reach families who are just coming on board. We get more questions from them from probably anybody else, purely because they're finding their way through how they can deal with their child's upper limb difference. For you, where was your first port of call when you wanted help with specific needs that Ethan has? What were your thoughts, and what would you advise other families watching?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. It's massive when you find out that your child's got a disability, and for Ethan, Ethan is affected in all four limbs. I'm just going to get him out so you can hear me. Just come sit on my lap. Yeah. Or maybe go and play with Daddy. Yeah. Go and play with Daddy.
Well, I think you're doing amazingly well, considering you've also got another baby there as well. So you've definitely both got your hands full.
It's really massive when you find out that your child's got a disability, and for us, it was really we found out really early in pregnancy that Ethan had his condition, and actually they weren't very hopeful for him. So to have anything that supports us is amazing. But it has taken quite a while to find different areas to support and different charities. And I'm sure there's even more out there than we're aware of, because it is just amazing what is out there. We started going up to London to some of the hospitals really early on. He was only sort of weeks old, and actually even just talking in the waiting rooms to people, even though conditions were different, that was really supportive. And then it's just really been through conversation and through the professionals that we've worked with, like Andrea, who have pointed us in different directions. The other thing that sort of help, and I sort of always am careful to take with a bit of a pinch of salt, are Facebook groups. So Facebook groups that of people with arthrogryposis can be helpful, but at the same time, for me, Ethan's quite severely affected, so people are affected at really different extents. So I have to just be careful sometimes just to protect myself with what I'm sort of reading and listening, and not that they're saying anything wrong, but just remembering like that everybody's different, and just like Peter's saying with the things that they're able to make and create for people, we're all different, aren't we? And we all need different things, and especially our special little ones with extra needs. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, completely, because there's no question the community that Reach has and Remap has with occupational therapists and so on, it all helps. And knowing that somebody else has got, maybe they will never be the same challenges that you, but the fact that they've got similar challenges, just talking to other people who actually understand and get it, I think is a massive benefit of these charities. And the fact that you're part of all of these families and talking and sharing your experiences, I know will be really, really helpful to others. So really big thank you to you today, because with your hands absolutely full to overloaded, for you to still come on and talk to us today, we're really, really grateful. So we'll let you go and carry on with Ethan.
Well, I'll just mute myself so you can't hear everyone.
Brilliant. And we would definitely, thank you very much. And we would definitely encourage everybody to please be an active part of the Facebook group, be an active part of all the various different groups. And actually, a lot of, like with every organisation, I'm sure, Peter, you would agree, and I'll hand back to you on this subject in a second. But these organisations, it's very much what you put into them, how much you share, then how much you get back. And that collaborative element of the community is massive. And you must have people who've been associated with Remap and come back to you and talk to you and help and so on, for many years.
I didn't mention when I first started talking that Remap was created in 1964. So we have some volunteers who possibly don't go quite that far back, but we have volunteers who have worked for us for 30 years. They keep on doing projects, helping us out, going into maybe slightly more passive roles. And we also have quite a lot of repeat projects for people who, once they've heard about us, they come back and say, I've just got, and in fact, it's not uncommon, to be honest, to go along to do one project and come away with another couple of projects that have cropped up during discussion. So yeah, it's short-term and long-term relationships.
And it's one of the things we see, obviously, particularly in the Reach family, where youngsters will have their whole childhood with Reach, and then they eventually go off into the outside world and do all sorts of amazing things. And then many of them become ambassadors and just stay connected with the family as well, which is really helpful. And I'm guessing for you, having seen people evolve, especially young people evolve, and you having to change their adaptations as they get older, and then to see them, you learn a lot from that as well.
Yes, there are a number of our younger clients where we've gone back and done modifications or rebuilds of the same basic project because they're getting bigger and their abilities change, and you need to adjust for that. So I'm half expecting another call to say, that drawing device we did, can we make a bigger one, or one with 2 pens, or one that's got a motor on it? I don't know. Who knows what they're going to ask me for?
Well, it's been absolutely brilliant, and it's given us a real insight, because obviously you've talked about people with differences, not just in their upper limbs, but all over their bodies, and it's been really interesting to have that perspective as well. At the moment, what we're going to do is suggest that we continue this conversation in the chat room. I know that all three of you have said very kindly that you'll stick around for a little bit longer if anybody wants to have a chat with you. Andrea, obviously, is an occupational therapist. Laura and Ethan there. I'm not sure Ethan will be answering any questions, but I'm sure he would love to get involved. If the colour is blue or it's a ball, then he would definitely be up for it. But Peter as well, thank you so much indeed for your time today. It's great that Reach and Remap are working together, and I'm sure there'll be a very long-lasting relationship that we'll have with you. And thank you very much indeed for taking the time out today to tell us more about what you do, and more importantly, how the Reach family and community can be involved. So thank you very much indeed, Peter, Laura, Ethan, and Andrea. Thank you all for joining us and for watching. Don't forget to continue the conversation in the chat below. There's lots more to be talked about, I'm sure. And we'll be back again same time next week at 10 a.m. for more Reach Insights. But in the meantime, bye for now.